I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I am speaking with Jim Wilson, the producer of the five-time Oscar-nominated movie, The Zone of Interest, including one for him in the little category called Best Picture. Um, First question I wanted to ask you is, when you first read the script for the film, did the tone of the film was it communicated in the script, or was that something that became more clear to you once you saw a finished product of it?
Um, well, thank you, Charlie. Actually, one thing I wanted to point out is that I produced the film with another producer in Poland called Eva Puczynska, and I want to give her full props and credit and respect for that. Um, in terms of the tone of the script, I think that's a sort of yes and no answer. I mean, first of all, the process of the development of the script was a very organic and quite long one. John Glazer and I have worked together for a while, and we were uh, talking about the idea of a film with this subject. I suppose the subject of the perhaps you could say the Holocaust, the Nazi project for some time before arriving at the Zone of Interest after reading Martin Amis's book. And then we spent a long time talking and thinking about that and researching it. And John was writing through that. So it wasn't like a process where there's suddenly a script arrived out of nowhere. And we were talking about the form and the content, and he was about the tone all the way through. Um, so it didn't happen in an abrupt or sudden way. Um, but I think over the course of that writing, there were things about the tone that carried through to the film that you saw, and that were consistent with it. Um, but there are other things that were very, very different. In fact, some of the most sort of singular things that you might notice about the tone now, because, for example, the idea about shooting it with the multi-camera system that you probably know about, the 10 cameras and the this sort of present tense, hyper real, almost documentary like realism. That was something that wasn't set from the beginning when John first started writing and conceiving of it. In fact, there were certain ideas about the tone and the style and the film language that were quite different, that were quite expressionistic, and heightened, that would have felt very different. Um, and that speaks a lot to John Glazer's process, really, because everything is always open to exploration. I think in some ways, though, all those different places the conversation went and different ideas and permutations found their way into the film in different ways. Um, so, for example, that the sort of very heightened expressionistic tone is there perhaps in sort of a way within the thermal imagery sequences with the Polish partisan girl who leaves the food for prisoners at night, which was shot with a thermal camera, which for John initially just came as a means to an end because um, he didn't want to use any movie lights in the film. The entire film is shot with natural light or practical lights that are within a scene. Um, and so to depict that sequence of a girl at night in the middle of Poland in the Polish countryside in 1943 when there were no lights, he was like, well, I don't want to have big movie lights on cranes and things. So how do we see? And I need a camera that can see in the dark. And we researched all sorts of different cameras, and we arrived at this thermal imaging camera called a FLIR. But it came out of and it came out a necessity, but of course it brings a kind of tone to it that is poetic and otherworldly. Um, but we didn't pre-plan that in the writing. So I think sort of yes, and no, both. The that tone of what John calls um, critical distance, the multi-cameras, the sort of um, not being too close, which you couldn't be given we were shooting most of the time in the house and the garden with 10 cameras, which was about recessing the paraphernalia of filmmaking away from the set, like taking us away. So the cameras were unmanned, they were remotely operated. There were few people on set apart from the actors, so they just could be and behave in that house. But because of that, you needed the cameras to be quite far away. You couldn't have close-ups because the cameras had to capture as much um, uh, of a frame as possible for the actors to be able to move around in it. So again, the methodology sort of partly created that tone, but those were things that we started exploring after we already had a script. So a bit of both.
So how did the set for the movie come about, specifically with that house? And did you actually shoot that at Auschwitz or within the vicinity of Auschwitz?
Yes, we shot that the house and the garden. We shot right next to the real Auschwitz, which is now, museum, Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum and Memorial. We um we always wanted to be in Poland. John always, I mean, it was a given that there were two givens on the film, that I think that it would be in its native languages, German and some Polish, obviously, and that we would film it in Poland. And John really wanted to film it in the real house, which is still there, that belonged to the Hosses and is a private home, which is lived in by a Polish family. Sometimes people are surprised or shocked by that fact, but it's not part of the museum. But its aspect is almost exactly as what we created in the film, and we spent a lot of time in that house. We got to know the family that live there, and their kids grew up there. It's actually their elderly mother lives there now on her own, and we thought about it, but it just wasn't practical, mainly because it was too modernized, 80 years on. Um, but we did actually shoot one scene and sequence in the film is shot in the real Hoss house, and that's the scene in the basement when he washes his genitals after um, coming back from that assignation with the woman in his office, and the tunnels that he walks through and the basement where he scrubs himself are real tunnels under the house, which we found when we were on a visit there, which itself led to that idea. So it's a little example of how organic was the development of the script and the creation of it. It was so research based. It was like an archaeological dig in a way. So we found this tunnel that goes from underneath the house into the camp, which is only a few hundred meters away, the camp from the house. And we shot that in the basement. Otherwise, it wasn't practical. And where we ended up doing it was almost next to that house, a few hundred meters away, on a corner plot that abuts Auschwitz. There was a derelict house that we always used to pass as we were moving around the town and seeing it and thinking about it. And long story short, we inquired about that house, and it was just set on a scrap of land, scrubby heathland, no garden or anything. But basically, that we decided to do it there, and Chris and our production designer and his incredible team basically renovated this derelict house and kind of rebuilt on top of it. It wasn't built from scratch, but it really, a lot of it was added to it. The whole back of the house, the porch with the steps where he um, the porch with the steps where he has his birthday toast with the SS officers who come, um, and the front of the house as well, where you see the kids walking out, leaving to school one morning. That was all refashioned and rebuilt, and then most extraordinarily, um, and most challengingly as a production, certainly the most complex, difficult physical production thing I've ever experienced was the making and the growing and the building of that garden, which didn't exist at all. I think some people watching the film might think, um, they found a garden and they added to it or something like that. That's what you would do on an independent film. I mean, this is a lowish budget independent film. You would find a house with a garden and you would add things to the garden. But no, Chris basically, it took, I think, about 5 months. And he grew and cultivated and built that garden, the walls, the pagoda, the greenhouse, all the architecture you see in it. Grew the lawn, built the paddling pool with the shower, grew the flowers, the vegetables in it, brought in some trees, the beehives. I don't know if you remember the moment when the mother visiting spots the bees. So yeah, we had six. There were three beehives. I think there were 6,000 bees in it to pollinate the garden, and we did that. Yeah, Chris, I think had about 5 months before we started filming to make that garden, and yeah, so that's how we did it, and it was really hard, but it was extraordinary in two ways. It was extraordinary to kind of have this three-dimensional, 300, well, of course it was three-dimensional, but this sort of 360-degree real world for Sandra Huller and Christian Friedel and the other people, the children playing the Host kids, who were all real children, real German kids. They weren't actors. To kind of just be in an immersive way, and everywhere they looked, it was that world. It was 1943. There wasn't an angle where there was a kind of a Hollywood, backlot facade or anything like that. It was absolutely real, and they could sort of live in it, really, almost. The house had working plumbing, running water, toilets flushed, all of which was put in there. It was just a shell. And the other part of that was extraordinary was being next to Auschwitz. So not only was the space itself kind of wholly authentic and real to be in as a space, and there wasn't a movie crew in it. There were cameras, of course, but there weren't, you know, we all were in a shipping container on the other side of the wall with 10 monitors inside, looking at all these different cameras, almost like a outside broadcast sports kind of thing setup. But also they were next to the real place, and over the prison wall was Auschwitz, and the house and the garden that we built was in a similar aspect to the Hosses' house. In fact, that chimney that is at the end of their garden that you see is the chimney of crematorium one, the first gas chamber and crematorium that was built there, and that is the position it's in. So yeah, that's how we mounted that part of the film, which of course is, you know, 2/3 of the film, the whole section where they're there in the summer, and the proximity of the house to the camp, which you see in that sequence where he goes to work in the morning at the beginning after his they give him his birthday present of the canoe, is an exact facsimile of the distance from the house to the camp and the SS command building, which is really the first thing that struck us, I think, and was probably one of the light bulb moments of the journey of what the film was going to be after we'd optioned the novel, which is going to Auschwitz, seeing the real house, and seeing how close it was to the camp, and how the walk from Rudolph's front door to the his office in the SS command building is about six, you know, we did it many times. It's about 60 seconds, if that. So he would kiss his kids goodbye off to school, and his wife, and walk to work, and work, which and his work was managing the mass extermination of hundreds of thousands of people, children, families, mothers and fathers, etc. And he would do that, and then he would go home. He would walk home, and 1 minute home, and read a bedtime story to his children and kiss them goodnight. And by all accounts, witness accounts, that is how they lived. And yeah, there's just something about that proximity that just is felt extraordinarily powerful, and that sort of became the film.
So, one thing I'm curious about is, you know, you had these amazing actors playing Rudolph and Hedwig Haas in Christian Friedel and Sandra Hüller. And I'm curious, they are both German actors, and I'm
Mhm.
curious as was it tough casting German actors to play these roles?
Um, well, as I said at the start, Charlie, there was never any question that the film would not be in German, majority German, in its native languages. Polish when Polish is spoken, which is not that much in the film, and German when German is spoken. There was never any question of having German actors speak English, like accented English, or you know, any of those conventions of or you know, English or American actors speaking their own accents or accented English in German. So it was always a given to do that. Was it hard? It it Do you mean in the sense of the individual process with those actors, or actors in German actors in general? I mean,
Well, yeah, I kind of mean because Sandra told me it said that this was a very tough decision for her
yeah,
to play
yeah,
because of the way that the Germans have the reflection
yeah,
on
yeah.
that part of their
Yeah,
past.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it's a good question, and yeah, no, I understand, of course. Um, yeah, it was yeah, what you say is true. There is, and we discovered it, and it wasn't, of course, part of our consciousness, but there is I think there's a lot of thought, and sometimes there's reticence. We came to learn. We worked with a brilliant German casting director called Simone Barr, who very sadly passed away at the beginning of last year, 2023, after doing the film with us, who is the most renowned film casting director in Germany, and the film's actually co-dedicated to her memory. And we learned through Simone and her casting associate Alexandra Montag that yeah, that there would be kind of thoughts and issues, and some that a lot of German actors had big questions and doubts about that, which of course seems obvious now talking about it, Charlie, but we hadn't really thought of. And that yeah, any German actor has you know, of any level of experience and success, um, has received scripts and you know, is asked to talk to, you know, it sort of crosses everyone's desk, you know, playing World War II characters in World War II stories, television, and whether that's, you know, Nazi soldiers or Nazis of different shades. And there are issues about that, particularly in quote unquote international films, like non-German films, when there are certain kind of tropes and cliches of it. And I do remember in conversations with Simone and Alex occasionally sort of names being mentioned. We didn't cast a very wide net because as soon as we saw Christian, I'm not making this up to be politic or anything, but as soon as we saw Christian, John knew it was Christian, and it was the same with Sandra, who we were thinking about. But inevitably, over the years of thinking about it, sort of names popped up. And I do remember Simone, sorry, I keep saying that, Simone or Alex occasionally saying, "Oh, so and so it will not do play a Nazi or will not do this period because, you know, they're sort of up to their neck with it." So with our two leads, it was a yes and no. Um, Christian was um, Christian was in without he didn't he Christian was in and he didn't have doubts about doing it. Well, I'm sure he had lots of doubts about and questions and fear about doing it, but he jumped in after we met him the first time. We felt that he was interesting from meeting him, and he committed to doing it. I'm sure with loads of, or definitely with loads of questions and things. Sandra, as she explained to you, was it was a process, and we knew she was extraordinary in our first meeting with her. We both said to each other it was one of the strongest experiences of meeting an actor for a part at first, you know, and in an instinctive level. She did so many things that just seemed to tell us that she was right. I remember she sort of did a bit of the walk that she does in the film, the physical sort of transformation. I remember her like miming weeding in the garden, and she talked about how her grandmother in East Germany used to weed the garden, and she planted her feet to each side and sort of mimed pulling up weeds in a garden. And it's I still see it in the film in her performance. So we were convinced, but yes, it was a process. It was a process for her, and quite a long process of doubt and doubt circling interest. And I think she had a strong feeling about John as a director um, that was pulling her towards it. But yeah, and compelling her. So I don't think there was a doubt about John. Uh, but but yeah, it was a real process with her working out um, whether she wanted to play Hedwig. And I think and having strong doubts about that in the way you say in terms of that character and as a being German and representing you know, playing a character like that. I think in some way where she what got her there and where she met John was they met in their doubts, actually, because John also is always asking questions and was riddled with doubt and is always turning the soil again and again and again and sort of throwing away, or not throwing away, but sort of, let's do it again, let's do it again, let's do it again. How can we make it better? How can we make it more singular? How can we make it more concentrated? And was full of doubts. And I think in a way, Sandra was drawn to shared doubts as anything in terms of her decision making. But yeah, it was a much longer process.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best over the next couple of weeks. And to all of our viewers, please like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to keep going to goldderby.com to make your predictions for the Oscars coming up on March 10th. Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you.